I'm going to jump right in. If
Sounds
Section 3 has ever made you want to throw your computer across the room, you were certainly not alone. In today's episode, we're going to explain what reasoning skills really are, why memorizing more content won't fix your Section 3 score, and how to build skills that actually move the needle forward, which is super exciting. So, welcome back to the Nurses Doing GAMSAT podcast. I'm Marie, I'm your host, and whether you're prepping between night shifts or fitting it in after a long clinical placement, this podcast is for you. Today, we're going to hear from Irvi, our lead science tutor and current fourth year med student at the University of Melbourne, who got a phenomenal 84 in Section 3. So stick around. This is going to be a good one. Welcome, Irvi.
Thanks, Ray. Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here and talk about my favorite section. I know I'm not a nerd, but
Favorite? What?
my favorite section's always section 3, and it is not as scary as it seems, and we will talk about why.
Okay, awesome. Well, before we jump in, I do want to mention to everyone all the links, the study guides, the deep dives, they're all going to be in the show notes here. So thankflipgamsat.com/episode 27. And as always, if you have any questions or want us to cover off something in future episodes, please drop us a comment or a DM. We are literally building this for you. So what we are going to cover and what this episode is really about is what is the science section actually testing? Super duper important. Why content alone won't save you, and what reasoning skills are. More importantly, how to build them, any myths or things that come up that I hear about Section 3, and how to get started without overwhelm. So, Irvi, did you want to dive in and kind of give us the basics of the format and the timing and the bits and pieces all about Section 3?
Yeah, so section 3 is the sciencey part of the GAMSAT, and is, depending on what university to apply you, is weighted more heavily than section 1 and 2, so very important. Its format essentially is 75 multiple choice questions that need to be done in 150 minutes. And it is essentially meant to, as you said, assess problem solving, reasoning skills, critical thinking in the context of science, which is biology, chemistry, and physics. And the three sciences are sort of split in different proportions in the section 3 of the GAMSAT. So biology and chemistry are both 40%, and 20% of the questions will be physics. That being said,
Gosh. Like, who wants more than 20% physics? No one, right?
everyone is. I love physics.
Oh my
I'm
God,
just
you are
letting you know.
amazing.
um, but essentially, if students read the ACER GAMSAT booklet, according to what ACER has there, it says that clearly the level of subject knowledge that you need is generally around first year uni for bio and chem, and then high school physics. But that being said, they go ahead and tell you that the test is primarily focused on problem solving skills and using the context of the science, so that and having that knowledge of uni and high school sciences gives you the language and gives you the context to answer questions. But predominantly, what it will be about and the skills you'll be tested on will be your reasoning skills and your problem solving skills. And there's lots of different question styles that the section 3 has. So things like texts and mathematical information, graphs, tables, diagrams, flowcharts, all of those different ways to present information.
But Irvs, I hear like all the time. I don't know what topics to study. I don't know what
Mm.
reasoning skills are. I'm just going to keep on doing questions, even though I'm not getting better. Like all of that is what I hear all the time.
Mm, mm. And it's very normal. It's particularly often difficult because there isn't a set curriculum, right? It's different to studying for the uni, studying for high school. You haven't studied like this ever before in your life. And it feels like you're shooting, again, darts in the dark, and might feel really scary. You don't know where you might be heading. But once you understand like the skills that you're building and how to train them, everything changes. And that sort of initial fear of, I don't know anything about section 3, actually transforms into confidence and comfort in each of those different sciences.
Look, a lot of students panic, and
Mm.
then they start trying to kind of learn or relearn those year 12 physics, the first year chem, the first year bio, but it just doesn't work. I know that I've said this in the podcast before, but I think it's really worth kind of going through what's the difference between knowledge acquisition. So, pardon me, the the chemistry, biology, and the physics, and skill acquisition, which is the reasoning skills. And the way that I like to differentiate, because I use a lot of analogies, I just feel like when people use analogies, it's way easier to get the point. Because whenever we say the word GAMSAT, people's brains just turn into mush for some reason. I don't know why. Look, mine included, so that's no
Yeah,
judgment there.
I
But
was going to say.
but an analogy usually just helps because then you get it in a different context and then you go, oh, it makes sense. But I liken it to learning how to swim. Like in Australia, we generally learn how to swim at school at about 5 years old. But the teacher doesn't turn around and go, hey, Irvi, you're going to learn how to swim today. Let's look up Wikipedia and learn every single thing about water that has ever existed, including the chemical composition. Like, that does not happen at school. Um, but it is assumed at 5 that you do know the basics. So you know water is wet. You know water is a liquid. You know, if you jump into water, you're not going to bounce out. You know you can't breathe underwater. At 5 years old, everyone's learnt that already, right? So you know the basics of water. And then it's about learning the skill of swimming because water is simply the environment in which you practice the skill of swimming. Now, when you put that into the GAMSAT, science is the environment in which you practice the skill of reasoning. So,
Mm.
learning the science and learning the reasoning are two different sets of things you need to be doing. Now, some people do need to learn a little bit more about water. I'm not saying that everybody knows all the physics, chemistry, and biology, but most people, even if you are, say, a nurse who hasn't looked at the physics ever, or an ambo, or a physio, or a pharmacist who, maybe you're okay with bio, but organic chem haven't looked at it. Probably what you need is about 20% of your time going towards studying, inverted commas, the water, so the science. But a solid 80% of your time should be around learning how to swim. That should be around learning the reasoning skills. And this is what's so misleading because most people
Mm.
flip that and they're doing 80% of the time on
Mm.
the sciences when that's just like learning about water. It's not teaching you, it's not getting you into the Olympics. And we
Yeah.
are all joining the Olympics here when we're doing the GAMSAT, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's very tempting to get caught into or go down deep dives learning the content because again it's comfortable, it's easy to learn. Everyone that's got somewhat of a sciencey background or even no science background, it's easier to put on a video, write some notes, feels very satisfying. What we avoid is the confronting stuff, which is stuff that, brings out, exposes our weaknesses, things we're not good at. And learning the reasoning skills is can feel very uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
rightly so, right? Because we're not used to that style of thinking generally. And the GAMSAT, you'll be surprised at the sorts of varied question styles and information that they give you, right? I've seen things about like camels and frogs and birds, and we're
What?
not here we're not here to teach you frog physiology or frog anatomy.
Well, I'm not. I don't know. I don't know if I want my doctor to know more about frogs than humans. Like,
Absolutely. And you will never learn every single thing, right? But it's about knowing, for example, this is how the body works, this is how the heart works, this is the physiology of pumping blood and delivering blood. And even if it's slightly different in a frog, the concepts are the same. And how can you take the concepts and the basics and implement that to a range of different topics that are thrown at you and reason through them and problem solve through them? Um, so that's why once you've sort of built the reasoning skills, no matter what happens, students will, are hopefully able to reason through it. And on an interesting note as well, something that I hear is, take away the time constraints, and students that actually sit down, unlimited time, despite having zero science knowledge, sit down to do the GAMSAT or a mock exam, for example, or a practice set of questions, they actually find that they surprisingly, if given the time and actually they pick apart things and reason through things, they surprise themselves because they actually do better than they expect, right?
Right.
So it's a bit like it comes down to that. And obviously, you don't have unlimited time, which is why having the science knowledge, to an extent, having that environment is important, but you want to do it hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, what you're expected to do is interpret unfamiliar data. And I mean,
Mm,
this all makes sense because you don't go to the doctors and everybody have the same symptoms all the time. Like,
mm,
if I look, for example, I'll use myself as an example. I've been so sick lately. I don't know if anyone who's following the podcast has known. I just like, even Irvi was like, how long has it been that you've been sick? Had two different things, and in between the two different viruses or bacteria, whatever they are, I had massive post viral symptoms. So I toddle along to my GP and I'm like, I'm having this chest pains. And he's an ex ED physician. So I'm like, thank God. So he whips out, he does an ECG. He's like, it doesn't look like pericarditis, but it could be. So we kind of do all the precautions, thinking that I've got pericarditis. And I come back and my hands are swollen, and I've got like some sort of, it felt like maybe rheumatoid arthritis-y kind of feeling. And he's like, okay, he is expected to interpret all of these unfamiliar things, chest pain and hand pain. That's not something that's normal, that goes together. What could it be? Okay, what are the next steps? I need to interpret this unfamiliar stuff that doesn't normally go together.
mm,
Just to close the loop, I don't have pericarditis, just if anyone's worried at home. I have something called costochondritis. I don't know what that is. It's
mm.
like chest painy stuff, but it's not as bad. Heart, all good. But again,
Great.
the reason why I say this is because the skills that you're learning to do, so, the interpreting unfamiliar data, applying logic to new situations, extracting meaning from different things. In the GAMSAT world, it's text, graphs, tables, all that kind of stuff. In the doctoring world, it's humans, right? And being able to eliminate wrong answers like really methodically becomes important. So, sending me for the ECG, going, it might be pericarditis, coming back, new thing. Okay, it's definitely not. All of these things, even though it doesn't feel like the science section is giving you these skills that you need to be a great doctor, it actually is. And
Mm.
like, we can still hate it. I mean, you can love it, Irvi, but everybody else here, if you're listening, please agree with me. We can still hate it, but we can still learn something from it. I don't have to
Mm.
love something to learn something from it, right?
Mm. That's a really good way of looking at it. And I guess, as you mentioned, it's about being, and ACE, that's what is testing, and this is what the GAMSAT is testing. You don't necessarily need to know everything, but can you work with the information that is given to you, and how do you respond to it, right? Because as you said, all of these skills translate to studying medicine and also being a doctor and working with unfamiliar information. And that is where sort of the skill acquisition comes in, and the reasoning through that content, through that unfamiliar stuff, picking it apart, applying the skills, knowing the sciences, putting it all together, and answering the question. That's what actually gets you to success in section three.
Oh, I love that. So let's dive into actual skill acquisition because
Mm,
I have asked thousands of students. I actually used to do like a roadshow across Australia. So I've lectured at UQ and USID and UNSW and UVic and UWS and like a bunch of places, right? So I'd have, 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, 400 people sometimes in a room. And I'd say, how do you build a skill? Put your hands up, tell me what you do to build a skill. And inevitably, most people would say, just practice. And I'm
Yeah.
like, great. Part of it is practice. Yes, let's not throw that in the bin. That's correct. But there's stuff to do before that. And then crickets. No one says anything. They're like, but isn't that how you learn? And I'm like, no. So let's look at skill acquisition. But I want to teach this in a different context because when I talk about the GAMSAT, like I said, things don't make sense. But if I said, for example, let's use my daughter Ruby, okay? Let's pretend she's 5 years old. And I said, today we are going to teach her addition. Would we ever just go, here, Ruby, here's some practice questions, learn it, bye, see ya? Like, we would never do that, right? What we need to do are a few steps before the practice questions to enable her to learn it properly and then practice. So the first step in skill acquisition, and if anyone's taking notes, if you're not driving, pull out your phone, take some notes. Step number one is always we teach the replicatable steps. So we say things like, cool, let's get some I don't know, bananas and apples, and we're going to put 2 bananas there and three apples here, and we're going to stick them together. And Ruby, can you count those out? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the most important step there is me telling her to count, because it doesn't matter how many apples and bananas, as long as she can count them, she's got the answer right. So step number one is always someone teaching you the replicatable steps. Step number two, and I kind of smushed these two things together, but like step number two is a worked example. Trust me, my daughter never listens to me, but when she sees what I do, she kind of gets it. And the more complicated the skill and the steps are, the more you're going to need worked examples. So definitely in this context of the GAMSAT, step number two, worked examples becomes important, and it's seeing the steps you've just learned. Now, step number three is our favorite practice questions, right? Like I said, practice questions important, but here is the important bit. You would never give Ruby multiplication, long division, subtraction. She's not learnt those skills yet. What's the point? The practice questions simply need to be practicing the skill you've learned, and here's the clencher, it's giving you feedback. The questions don't actually teach you anything. It's simply providing feedback as to whether or not you're doing the replicatable steps. Because if you get the questions right, hey, presto, good on ya. You're getting it right. You're moving forward. You're learning a skill. Gold star, A+, we're all happy. But if you get it wrong, well, let's put this in the context of Ruby. If Ruby goes and she gets some addition wrong, you're not turning around to her and going, you're such an idiot. You're never going to be an accountant or a checkout chick or whatever else you use counting, like, or you're never going to be a doctor, right? But sometimes when we get practice questions wrong, we take it really personally because we don't realize the practice questions are simply feedback that we need to go back to step number one and learn how. We just don't know how yet. So these 3 steps are probably the most important thing that you can do to change your section 3 result. But most people skip the first two steps, go to the third step, smash out practice, keep on practicing like shit technique basically, and then wondering why they're not getting the answers. That's why we got to go back to real old-fashioned learning. Not even old-fashioned, it's a new fashion, it's current fashion. It's skill acquisition is the new black, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we need to stop saying practice questions, which, look, no one's ever going to stop it, but crazy old me, I call them feedback questions. It's simply feedback. What are your thoughts, Irvi?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a trap that I see students falling into with the practice questions, particularly where there is this urge, and it's a very, I think, biomed, coming from biomed, I totally get that, because you do questions, you do lots of questions. Once you've done enough of them, you actually kind of realize you're making somewhat progress along the way. But the questions you're doing are based on the content that you've studied. It's not necessarily random new stuff. And students struggle to sort of make that shift from, okay, I don't need to do a million practice questions, and I'll be okay if I don't do a million practice questions, but let's transition to learning the skills and, learning the, as you said, replicable steps to a skill. So in the GAMSAT context, for example, let's say there is a practice question on that has a graph and has a flowchart and has a bit of math, right? So every student's nightmare all in one.
Not your mate, you love it, but every
My
normal
favorite.
person's nightmare.
Essentially, we're not. Obviously, you do a practice question, but to do that practice question, you don't want to shoot blindly, right? You need to know, okay, if I have a graph, what does it really take to interpret a graph? I need to look at the axes, and I need to look at the numbers, and I need to look at the legends and the figures and the curve of the graph. And then when you're looking at math, you want to know how to rearrange equations and plug in numbers in the formulae and all these sorts of things that are just very difficult to do if you don't know how to do them. And naturally so, we're not looking at graphs every day. So it translates really well. And, there's a few things that are involved when it comes to GAMSAT reasoning. Often every stem or every question you have will tell a story, and that's what I tell my students to do. Find the story of the question, because everyone gets lost in the sciences and the words and everything that's happening, and they miss the big picture. And I did that a lot in my prep. I would zone into every single word and try to understand every bit nitty gritty, and I feel like I've read everything, and then I step back and I'm like, hang on, but what was this about? Because I missed the big picture.
Oh my god, that can change someone's life, Irvi. Know the story of the stem. That is,
Mm, mm.
yep, I love that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's the same with everything, right? And it's the natural way we often do things. Let's say you're reading a book or you're reading an article. You're not reading every single word and every single letter. You're reading it to get the overall meaning, right? So that's what you want to do for section 3 when you first encounter a stem. And then break it down in ways that your brain likes, there's no one right way. I was talking to, it reminds me of a student that I was talking to who um, was did March and was wanting to do September again, and we're breaking down his GAMSAT approach. And one of the things that I realized was how much he loved just thinking about things in a stepwise process, A to B, B to C, in a very logical way. And then I was like, if you have any stimulus thrown at you, you can mold it and shape it to a way that your brain likes interpreting. So if you read a stimulus, think about how you can convert it into a logical flow of things or a methodical thing that then your brain will read and completely understand. And for some people, that's flowcharts. For some people, that's diagrams. For some people, that's note taking. Whatever that is, find that for you and use that. And then it's a matter of also, so once you've done that, you want to know what question types are thrown at you. And there's lots of different types. And the more practice, this is where the practice comes in, the more practice you do, you realize how to eliminate and how to deal with question styles and how to not make silly mistakes. The biggest silly mistake, honestly, that I see is students not reading the not. So, for example, there'll be a question like, which of the following is not correct? But their brain reads it as which of the following is correct.
Oh, that's the worst. And you're like, it's an easy mark, you've just
It's
lost.
like, damn it, my heart breaks every time I see that. And the obviously is getting familiar with these question styles and familiar with your downfalls when you see these question types. So, what question types actually consistently pop up as the ones you're getting wrong? And, doing that, what the question's asking for. And then you knowing the basics, apply all of those skills, right? Through in this case, a practice question is your worked example, but you're reading the graph, you know the skills, and now you're looking at it with intention and with the purpose to answer your question. So all of that is very, very important and plays into, answering a question in the GAMSAT and studying for the GAMSAT. And the biggest thing as well is the cognitive load under time pressure.
Oh, yes. Like, make everybody sweat. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's genuinely hard, but again, this is where training and practicing comes into play. Right? It's completely unfair to ask you to wake up one day and run a marathon. It's just you're not going to be able to do it.
Do not do that, please. I do
Don't
not
do
ask you
that.
to
This
do
is not any form of medical advice, even if I'm not qualified to do that. Um,
But it's true, right? Like, you don't wake up one day and run a marathon. You don't wake up and go, I have to do it timed. It's so, you know what? Years ago, years and years. Now we usually recruit our tutors mostly from students that have been through the boot camp. But years and years before we started that strategy, we had this tutor that came to us, and we used to ask all of the tutors that were working for us the same questions. He got in the 80s, maybe even the 90s, but let's say the 80s just to be sure. And I said something like, "Tell me what happened in the exam," and he said, "Oh, I didn't finish the exam." And I was like, "What? How'd you get so high?" And he's like, "Yeah, because you don't get extra marks for all of the questions that you do. You only get extra marks for all the questions you get right." And he said, every single question that I touched, I got right. So I didn't care if I left a few at the end because I wasn't going to rush some to get them wrong, only to get the ones at the end wrong as well, because that's more wrong. And it made me realize, the time pressure, it is important, but it's not everything. What's actually important is not worrying about the time. It's about being focused on what's in front of you and getting that right at that time and getting as many of them right as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that.
So, what I was thinking, Irvi, if we
Mm.
could maybe do some rapid fire questions that I get all the time because I want someone else to answer the questions that I answer all the time. And we probably would say the same thing, but I've written down a bunch of them. So, I'm thinking like one or two kind of sentence answers about kind of these core things.
Done.
Number one, you need to know heaps of science content.
Very common myth. It is not a content recall test. Your uni test is a content recall test. The GAMSAT is about reasoning with unfamiliar material. You have everything you need. You need to apply, interpret, and problem solve.
Okay. If you haven't done physics, you're screwed.
Many high scorers actually never studied physics because
Wait,
it's the one that people least study, right?
what? Did you study physics?
I did. I'm the I love physics, right? I love
You are not the example.
I'm not the example. Don't use me as the example. But in general, no one's studying physics and no one's loving physics like I do. And often the physics questions are based on the conceptual reasoning, the problem solving, dissecting information, very strong reasoning skills rather than knowing all the content.
Okay, love that. More content equals higher score.
A little bit of the opposite to that. Students often will learn the content and underlearn the skills because, as I said, it's the easier thing to do. But you can know, like, you can have a PhD in osmosis, literally, and not get the question right because you won't be able to reason through it. So it's about the skills plus the environment of the content.
Oh, this one that I wrote down, I get it all the time. Particularly from my nurses. So if you're a nurse, my heart goes to you right now. Section 3 is only for science students.
No. Students from every background, arts, music, engineering, can do section 3 because it's about how to think and not just what to know, right? And at Thankflip, we've helped so many, as you said, nurses, people from diverse backgrounds, lawyers, journalists, ambos, podiatrists. And I'm pretty sure it's like a cello player as well
Yeah,
that we
we
got.
did. We have
Oh, there you
shout
go.
out if you are listening, Elizabeth, our cello player now becoming a doctor. I love her.
Yes,
You
there
know
you
what? I
go.
have helped a theatre manager, not like a play performance theatre manager, not a theatre manager for like not a
Yeah,
scrub person,
yeah.
um, like an actual play. I have helped. I've got at the moment we have a builder who did building for 30, 40 years in her career and has decided that she wants to become a doctor. Like, Section 3 is not only for science students.
Mm,
I tend to think, personally, and you can tell me otherwise, Evie, it's like sometimes the science students go too far into the sciences, and that can actually be a problem. So it's
mm,
not always helpful. It feels like it might be a problem. You know what would fix all of this Section 3 is only for science students kind of nonsense is we should just call it the reasoning section instead of the
mm.
science section. I just wish we could do this rebrand,
Yeah,
instead of
Asa.
calling it. Yeah, exactly like this. So it's not the science section; it's the reasoning section, and then it would be a lot more inclusive. So if
Mm,
you're like a podiatrist and you haven't looked at physics forever, you don't feel like, oh, I can't do this, because
mm,
that
mm.
is not true. Okay, next
Absolutely.
myth. Next myth. You need to memorize formulas.
You don't, I promise. If you need to use a formula, it will be provided to you in the question stem. And you can memorize a formula all you want and not know how to use it, right? So it doesn't matter. It's
Yes.
all about, as we said, you know, the logic of the formula. What is it saying? How do you implement? If X increases, what happens to Y? How do I switch things around? All of those skills.
Yes. Okay, another big one. I'm just going to do practice questions and I'll improve.
You will not necessarily improve.
Damn it.
Mine is it's like mindless repetition, right? Because you can smash out a million questions, but if you don't know why you're getting things wrong and why you're getting things right, and you're making the same mistakes every time, to make yourself feel better, yes, you've done 3,000 questions and you feel like you've ticked off all you need for the GAMSAT, but have you really improved? Probably not, right? It's all about that analysis, feedback, and digging for those weaknesses and implementing the new stuff when you do a new set of questions.
Yeah, and then targeted drills. Like, it's not just,
Mm,
we didn't give Ruby multiplication, long division, and subtraction when we were teaching her addition. It's like, no, those questions were feedback questions, and they were specifically addition questions because the targeted drills, rather than mindless repetition, is what's important.
mm.
All right, next myth. Speed is the key to scoring well.
No, rushing will lead to careless mistakes in the GAMSAT, in life as a doctor, right? High achievers know when to slow down, when to take a moment, breathe, think, and they've sort of analyzed that risk benefit of I'm going to spend a little more time, but I know I'm going to get every question in this STEM correct. And even though they have taken a bit longer, they know they've gotten things correct. And it's similar to that tutor that didn't finish, but you know basically got everything correct with the questions that he did. So time management is a skill you build after accuracy and strategy and knowing what your strengths are and playing to them.
Yeah, if you have not listened to the Section 2 podcast that we put out last week, I talked about Joey, Joseph, who's one of my Section 2 students who actually got in the 100th percentile. And his first essays took so long to write, it was like a couple days, but we didn't actually start changing his essay timing until he had done 8 or 10 essays, because he needed to get the essays right before he started to jam it into half an hour.
Yeah.
Same thing with the science
Mm,
section, right? Like, if you're not getting
mm,
the technique right, what's the point? Or like, what's the point of rushing it? Even if you think about swimming as that analogy that I was talking about earlier, like, you can't learn to swim and then the next day go to the Olympics. Like, it doesn't work that way. There's all these like little intricate things that you need to fix along the way, and it's like a real story here. Okay, no judgment from anyone. Okay, but Tom, Dr. Tom, he's my husband. used to swim, ocean swim every day for like years. It was like, I don't know, 8 years or 10 years, every day. It was cold outside. Like at the moment, it's 17-degree weather, like water here. He would have been in the water, just crazy. So the man knows how to swim very well. He's also 6'3". Okay, so
Mm.
big hands, big feet. It's like he's got flippers on all the time, right? Now, I am not 6'3", and also I do not swim every day. So not that long ago, Tom's like, "Oh, let's go for a little swim together. It'll be really cute." La la la. So jump into the water. It's a little bit of a choppy day. So for him, water off a duck's back. Like absolutely no like issues. Now, for me, I am flapping out there like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Like, and it made him realize maybe we had gone too far, too deep, too quickly.
Oh
Because
dear.
I didn't have all of the little, because he knew all of the different things to do with his hands. And like, if I'm going to swim, it's going to be in a pool. I'm not doing
Yeah,
laps in the ocean like
same.
he is. No, no, he's crazy, does laps. It doesn't matter. Like, if there's a hurricane on, he's going to jump in. He'll be fine, right? I do not have those skills. So we can't go into the slightly choppy water until I have learned how to swim in the not so choppy water. Um, anyway, long story short, I did not die. Um, don't know if you realize
Here we
that.
are.
But it's the same thing. We need to build the accuracy, build the strategy before we go into the doing it quickly and doing it, right.
Yeah.
So, next one. Getting a
Mm.
few questions wrong means that you've blown the whole exam.
No, GAMSAT scoring doesn't work like that. It's not an absolute score that you're getting. It's scaled, which is why it's more like a percent. You'll see the percentile graphs. Missing questions doesn't necessarily ruin your chances. Um, it just means that you've got it wrong and everyone's getting questions wrong, right? No one's getting all the questions correct. We need to step away from that mindset. And how it works is like how you're scored is your performance relative to others. And it's just about that consistent logical thinking, right? And that's why you have students that consistently talk about an extremely difficult GAMSAT consistently across the board, but get surprised when they get their scores because everyone has found it difficult, and so the scaling works in that way such that not everyone's getting a 40, but you're all scaled against each other and get a score based on that.
Exactly. And this is so important where I say to my students all the time, you can't actually know what your score is going to be. It
No.
doesn't really matter how you feel about the
Mm,
exam
mm,
because you are not getting based on your individual performance. You are running the 100-meter sprint in the Olympics. If
mm,
everybody else falls over, you're going to come first. So
mm,
you got to do the best that you can because that's the only thing you can control. And then once the exam's done, let it go because
mm.
you don't know everybody else. You don't know what's happened to them. You know that speed skater that won the Olympics because literally everybody fell over. Steve Bradman. Brad, is that his name? Bradman. Anyway, he won the
Yes.
Olympics.
Mm,
Um, and this is the way you got to think about it. You got to do your best and let it
mm,
go, and
mm.
you're going to see what the result is. You know,
Yeah.
one thing that also reminded me of most people don't realize that you are not actually sitting the same exam as the person next to you. There are all these different questions that they put in. I don't know how ASA does it, but there's some mathematical equation I'm sure that they use, whereby there's slightly different exams or there's a number of different versions of the exam. So you
Mm,
might go out like after you've sat section 3 and go, oh man, that just felt all
mm,
like physics. And the next person next to you is
mm,
going to go, oh, that all felt like organic chemistry. And you're going to go, they'd be crazy. What are they talking about? I didn't
mm,
remember one organic chemistry thing.
mm.
But like, firstly, your perception's going to change. But so your perception of what you're doing is different to theirs. But also, they could be sitting a whole different exam. Like,
Yeah.
so you
Literally.
can't actually compare.
Mm,
And it's like you gotta. You said the word right. You've got to change your mindset on it and just focus on what is in your sphere of control.
mm, mm.
So I got two more written down here. The
Okay.
next myth: if I don't understand a science topic, I can't do that question.
No. So as we talked about, not necessarily, right? There's things about camels and frogs, as we mentioned, and so the
Camels.
GAMSAT can
I don't know
introduce.
why. Frogs, I get. Camels, I don't. I don't
I don't
really
even
understand
know. Every
like
year,
camels.
I feel like every year there's just a slightly different animal or
Oh,
something
remember
that is.
platypus? What
Yes,
was
I think that was
platypus one year?
March. Yes. So you will see this like novel and obscure topics in the GAMSAT that I would not recommend learning about. Don't learn about camels and frogs and platypus. Um, you're just meant to reason through the unfamiliar topics, not just rely on recognition and all that science content necessarily. So, as I said, the passage that you get, the story that you get is your friend because it tells you everything that you need to know. And it's about picking through that and understanding how to apply that to the questions that are being given to you.
Ah, I love it. Last one here. I heard this yesterday. So thank you to
Mm.
that student, if you know who you are, that said this. Um, your name might start with Ange if you're listening. Um, I'll never be good at section three. It's just too hard.
This is it's sad because
Mm, my throat.
yeah, because a lot of students might feel this way, but it only will feel overwhelming if you treat it like a uni exam where you have to know all this content to be able to do well, right? That is how uni exams work, that is how high school exams work, and that's how we've been trained to study. But when you make a shift from knowing everything and having your exam equate to knowing everything, and shift from that to your reasoning skills and skill acquisition, as we talked about, that improvement becomes predictable and repeatable. And at some point, fingers crossed, even fun because you can actually, it's like solving a puzzle or doing a crossword. It's the same sort of way of thinking that you start applying to the section 3 GAMSAT, and you will realize that you can actually come a long way.
I think most people find it fun when there's progress. I think
Mm,
why most people kind of go, it's too hard, I can't do it, is because they get to a limit and then it kind of bang, you stop. But
mm,
when you create progress and that growth, even if you're not there yet, it does become fun. Like when I start, like when I'm lifting weights, I've been so sick, I haven't been lifting weights. But when you're making progress, even if, like, I know now when I go back into the gym, I'm going to be so far behind, I'm not going to be able to lift the same weights that I was lifting before. But the fact that I can go there, see that I'm on track to getting back
mm.
to where I was, that's fun and that
Yeah,
feels good.
yeah.
So, before I dive into how to get started, Irvi, can you tell us what are some of the things we should avoid doing?
There's a few things, and we've sort of, touched on some of these throughout. But biggest thing is don't just binge on practice questions without feedback. There will be no improvement if you're not reflecting. So that's a big one that students often fall into. Don't do that. The other thing is don't try and learn all of first year uni science. It is literally impossible. Um, because I was having this conversation with a student just to sidetrack a bit. I have learned sciences all my life, right? I did a lot of math growing up, did all the three sciences in high school, biochem, physics, did biomed in uni, right? I have acquired all of this knowledge over years. And what students expect to do in the GAMSAT is learn all of that I have taken years to learn within 3 to 4 months. It is just impossible, and you will never be able to do that. So try to learn it in a smart way and learn it in the context of what is important, and build more importantly the reasoning skills around all of that.
Yes.
Um, the other thing that I see pop up a lot is like we're comfort creatures. We love something that's comforting, that is rewarding, that gives us that dopamine hit, that makes us
Stop it. You're talking about me, aren't you?
yeah, as you mentioned, that progress in the gym, the heavier weights, right? We love that. And often you'll see everyone, if someone's benching really, really high consistently, they'll just keep benching and then their legs will look like little chicken legs, right? Because they hate training legs. And we don't want that disproportionate study. It's very easy to do that because we hate the stuff we hate. But don't ignore your weak areas. Try to actually see why you're struggling in them, right? Why is that a weak area? Is it because you don't know the content? Is it because you don't like the content? Is it because you don't know how to reason through the content? What is it? And take baby steps to actually improving. Right? I'm not telling all the gym bros to start training their legs and start squatting 200 kilos. Start with baby weights and then build your way up. And just like everything else, you will make progress. We all start from somewhere.
I'm glad that you use that as an analogy because sometimes we feel like a bit embarrassed that we have weak
Mm,
areas.
mm,
So I don't know how many people know, but Tom actually does powerlifting now because of Dr. Tom, because of he had osteoporosis. So he was diagnosed with
mm,
osteoporosis. He was told to go on some drugs by an endocrinologist, but the drugs are super dangerous and may have eaten away at the bone in his jaw. So he said, "Nah,
mm,
fuck that, I'm not doing that." How about we try a natural way first? He went through all of the medical journals because he's a doctor, he knows how to read that kind of stuff. And he came up with his own treatment plan. And part of it is that he needs to lift really heavy weights.
mm,
So he starts lifting all these heavy weights, reverses his osteoporosis. Fantastic news. Everybody's happy. Doctors are happy. He's happy. But it means that he needs to lift heavy weights. But sometimes when you're doing that all the time at the gym by yourself, it can get a bit, I would think,
mm,
boring, but he loves it. Anyway, he was like, his trainer said to him, I think you should like go into a weightlifting contest. So he went into this like full deadlifting contest, right?
I did not know this.
Yeah. So he gets up on stage. It's like, I don't know how to explain this deadlifting contest. It's like heavy metal playing. There's a stage and there's weights on the stage and like hundreds of people in the crowd. There's these strobe lights. It's almost like a heavy metal concert with everybody is fit. Like you've never seen so many muscly people. So
Wow.
me and my daughter kind of go there. I have like those headphones for my daughter so the music's not so strong. And you get 3 tries and he's lifting 160 kilos. First try gets up there, shaky, can't lift it, gets to his knees. Second go, gets up there, shaky, lifts, like gets it off the ground to his knees. You only get 3 tries. Third try, super shaky, lifts it to his knees, doesn't get up. And he's like mortified, right? In front of
Mm,
all of
mm,
these like massive big guys. And like his trainer is the national championship and lifted
oh,
230 kilos that day
oh,
in his age group. He's like 55 years old. And so my 42-year-old husband couldn't get 160 kilos off, which for us regular folk sounds like that's crazy who can lift that. But in
yeah.
that context, it wasn't as heavy as he would have liked. Um,
Mm,
and his trainer was like, "I'm proud of you. You got up
mm,
there. You saw it. We know what we need to work on now." And
mm,
and started creating a program for him. Within the next month, he had easily lifted 160 because they had changed the
mm,
program because they understood the weak areas that he needed to
mm,
fix.
mm.
Was he
Yeah.
there crying at the end of the day saying he didn't lift it? No. He was like, okay, well, now I know what I need to focus on. A little bit
Mm,
embarrassing, but it's not. Like, who's he embarrassed in front of? Me? I wasn't up there trying to lift 160 kilos having worked out and
yeah.
reversed my osteoporosis. You should be bloody proud. I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. And like
Exactly.
in the grand scheme of life, it doesn't really matter if you don't get things straight away and if you
Yeah.
are feeling lost and have weaknesses. Like, that's just what makes us human, honestly. And I think it also, like, I think studying for the GAMSAT, especially if there's people around you studying for the GAMSAT, you can get into that sort of weird competitive mindset. But you're on your own journey, and everyone is like has your life is completely different to someone else's life and will always be different to someone else's life, and you do things the way the way you prefer. And in that process, you'll find things that are your weaknesses and find things that are your strengths, and you just work to grow and improve upon your weaknesses. And as you mentioned, it's not about panicking when you don't get it straight away. Although it's obviously easier said than done, but it's about understanding why you're not getting it straight away, and understanding that it is unnatural to get things straight away, right? When you're
Right.
learning something new.
Yes, we forget that. I mean, you would
Yeah,
never scream at my daughter Ruby for not getting one of her practice questions right first go.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
no, no. Kids are actually quite good at this. I thought like I might have been really hard on my daughter, and she was like at times getting frustrated when she wasn't picking stuff up at school. And she's a
Mm,
bright girl. She's in all of the extension English, extension maths. Like, she's a clever kid, and she was getting frustrated. And I said to her, well, even mama doesn't pick things up straight away. And she goes, I know. Like, she can really see it. I was like, oh, okay. I'm leading by example
oh,
there, aren't I? But it's kind of a good thing, right? Monkey see, monkey do. So it gave her
mm,
permission to, if she doesn't get it straight away, let's not get frustrated. Let's just not shy away from the things we're not good at. Let's look at it. So that's a
yeah.
really good segue for me to kind of go, okay, what do we need to do now? Where do we get started? And I'm going to say the first thing you got to do is just accept that it's a skill based test. Whether you like it or not, just come to acceptance. Isn't that like one of the steps to like grief counseling and
Yeah,
stuff?
it's
Like,
like
you
the
got to
cycle, the five
accept.
stages of grief. It's
Hashtag
actually the
trauma.
final step, right? So you start with the final step, and then you go depression, you go anxiety, you go anger, you go bargaining.
Yes, we should start a new group called GAMSAT Grief Counseling.
Yeah.
No, we're going to start with acceptance. And then what is really important is doing a diagnostic test. So, doing like a set of questions so that you can identify, okay, these are the exact skills that I need to fix.
Hmm.
After you've done that identification process, then it's about creating a plan. So that means, who is going to teach you that replicatable process? Where are you going to find all of the worked examples?
Hmm.
And what actual practice questions, or should I say feedback questions,
Hmm.
are you going to do? And put that into a plan. It's important to know you're not going to get that done in a day. You can make the plan in a day, but that plan may take you a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, depending on what else you've got in your life. And understanding that slow process is going to be built in layers. It's not something that is going to, you're not going to learn it today or learn how to swim today and go to the Olympics tomorrow. Like,
Hmm.
it's okay to go slow with that.
Yeah, for sure. And don't do it alone. That's why we're here. That's why we have such a lovely team to help you with that replicable process, breaking down questions, understanding the story, and getting that feedback and support.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Sometimes it's about just saying it's okay. You can get it, and
mm,
pushing
mm,
people back into the ring, or like Tom's
mm.
trainer, patting him on the back, saying you should be proud. I know you didn't pick it up
Yeah.
today, but next year, and in fact he can already, like, now he's on to 175. I'm pretty sure 170 picking up,
Wow.
and by the time the next comp comes in December, he's going to be doing 180 on that stage. And it's like
Mm,
sometimes you need someone to tell you and support you through that process.
mm.
So I think that's where we should wrap it. I think that's a great way to end the day. Thank you so much for going so deep into those reasoning skills. I'm sure we're going to be doing more in future episodes, but I hope that for anyone listening, this really gave you a clearer roadmap on what you need to be doing. Um, if you have found this helpful, make sure you subscribe, leave a rating, share it with a mate who's doing the GAMSAT, pop it into a GAMSAT group. We love it when that happens. And remember, you don't need to have it all figured out. Just take the next step. You've got this. Thank you so much, Irvi.
Thank you, Marie.
Bye.